The use of the comma. The comma is a mark that is used for more than several reasons. More than any mark, the comma draws our attention to the mixed origins of modern punctuation. And the comma actually has two distinct functions. It illuminates grammar in a sentence, and it points up rather in the manner of a musical notation, for instance, like rhythm, the direction, the pitch and tone, and the flow. When we talk, it's not like we pause when we talk. So that is what I mean by when I say to point up. One of the ways that I think of a comma is similar to a flashing yellow light. Like when you're driving a car, when you see a flashing yellow light, that signal warns you to proceed with caution. So you don't need to stop for a flashing yellow light, but you must slow down and be, very careful and alert before entering the intersection. So when you see a comma in a sentence, it's like a flashing yellow light, which is very similar to the way we talk ordinarily. We pause. There's certain times that we pause, and there's certain times that pause is actually to heighten, illuminate what we're actually saying. So punctuation developed slowly and cautiously in reference to the comma. It's not because it's not considered to be important, but on the contrary, it's important for us to actually pause. So consider this. When we're saying a sentence, reading a sentence, and we pause in the wrong place, the sense of the actual text can be altered significantly. And as we continue on, we'll see in the next slide. So let's compare the following. The first sentence reads, "Verily I say unto thee, this day thou shalt be with me in paradise." Now let's read the second sentence. "Verily I say unto thee, this day thou shalt be with me in paradise." So when we read these two, the pauses are strategically placed in different places. So when we first started off, there's a pause in the first sentence. Verily, pause, which is the comma. I say unto thee, pause, and another comma. Versus when we are looking at the second sentence, it's verily I say unto thee this day. Then there's a pause. So the understanding of the sentence is different based on the preference of where the author is placing the pauses. So, if when you look at these, you're not picturing yourself resorting to the, what's the correct way to punctuate using the commas, based on what you'll be learning, then let's just say this. I hope that when you look at both of these sentences, you are saying to yourself, what is the correct way of punctuating this using commas? And as we continue on with the lesson, I want you to become more confident so you will know what's the correct way. Sometimes with commas, it's basically the preference of the actual author that's writing the sentence. But there are rules with commas. The first rule of commas that we're going to go over is separating items in a list. We use commas to separate items in a list of 3 or more. It's for separating items in a list of 3 or more. Pay close attention to that. So let's look at our first sentence, and as we look at it, I want you to know that the comma is like the sheepdog of punctuation. A sheepdog is used to guard the sheeps and other livestock in farms and farmers. So what the comma is doing, it's guarding the other words within the sentence. And so it performs very well. And we'll see here as we take a close look here in the first sentence. The first sentence reads, Carlos wants to visit Paris, Italy, Germany, and China. Now, as you can see, when I was reading it, I naturally paused. And so that is where your commas are going to go. Carlos wants to visit Paris, comma, Italy, comma, Germany, comma, and China. That's it. Now, sometimes people think about the fact that in Oxford or Harvard, how the commas, some people would favor the comma. And so people would place a comma before the end of the word and. But in America, the U.S., the comma is a little bit different. So let's read on to the second one. The second sentence reads, my favorite colors are blue, red, and pink. I've listed 3 colors, so my comma is going to go behind my favorite colors are blue, comma, red, comma, and pink. That's it. Moving on to the next one. I like to go hiking, fishing, swimming, and camping during summer. So I've listed several things that I like to do during the summer. So my first comma, I like to go hiking, comma, fishing, comma, swimming, comma, and camping during summer. I do not put a comma anywhere further because my list has discontinued after the word camping. But I have the word and there. And finally, our last sentence that we're going to take a look at is the flag is red, white, and blue. So the comma goes after the word red. The flag is red, comma, white, comma, and blue. Let's move on and look at another way we can use the comma. Now, in conjunction to separating items in a list with commas, we can separate items in a list of adjectives. So in a list of adjectives, again, the rule is that you use a comma wherein and would be appropriate, where the modifying words are all modifying the same thing to the same degree. The first thing is you want to make sure you know what an adjective is. An adjective is a words that describe or modify another person or a thing in a sentence. So if I was talking about a man, I would say the man is tall and handsome. The man is short and big. So the word tall and handsome is modifying the word man. The word short and big is modifying the word man, the person. So let's look at this sentence, this example. It was a dark, stormy night. So the thing that I'm talking about in this sentence is the night. What kind of night was it? It was a dark, stormy night. So I would put the comma in between the word stormy, dark and stormy. So now it reads, it was a dark, stormy night. So that pauses it. And to make sure that we did that correctly, we would just go back through the sentence and say, well, where could I put the word and to make sure that this is appropriate. The way that you check this to make sure that, okay, did I put the comma in the right spot? You go back and you read it, and where you put the comma, you place the word and. And if when you read it, it sounds appropriate, then you place the comma appropriately. So it would read, it was a dark and stormy night. So we have the word "and" in between the word dark and stormy. In the first sentence, we have the comma in between the word dark and stormy. So that's why we know, okay, I actually put the comma in the correct place. I can move on now. So let's take a look at some more rules. Moving on to the next slide. Now let's take a look at our second rule of inserting a comma, and our second rule is joining sentences. Commas are used when two complete sentences are joined together using conjunctions such as and, or, nor, so, but, yet. So when we use a comma to separate independent clauses, which is a complete thought, which is a sentence, when they are joined by the following conjunctions, it looks such as this example. And I want you to pay close attention to where we put the comma, because the comma should be before the conjunction. Now let's look at our example. I want to buy the new jacket, but it is too expensive. So if I look at this sentence, I notice that there are actually two complete thoughts in this sentence. The first thought is, I want to buy the new jacket. That's a complete thought. The second complete thought is, it is too expensive. So what we're going to do is look at where we have the word but, which is our conjunction, and we're going to place our comma. I want to buy the new jacket, comma, but it is too expensive. Remember that comma should always come before the conjunction. So let's look at one more example. It's a little bit different. The boys wanted to stay up until midnight, but they grew tired and fell asleep. These clauses are separated by a comma before the conjunction but. So in our first example, the conjunction is in between two complete thoughts. But in our second example, the conjunction, the comma is inserted, right before the conjunction but. So one is basing the rule on the complete thoughts, and the other one is solely basing the rule on the conjunction itself. Both conjunction is the word but just pay close attention to the fact that one is based on not just solely the actual conjunction, but the fact that there are two complete thoughts, and the second one is basing it on the fact that we have a conjunction there. Now let's consider another aspect of using the comma. We'll see here in the third rule to use a comma to separate a dependent clause from an independent clause. Let's understand what a dependent clause is. A dependent clause is an incomplete thought. It's a group of words that has both a subject and a verb, but it's unlike an independent clause. It can't stand alone as a sentence. It's also known as a subordinate clause. The independent clause is a group of words that's made up of a subject and a predicate. An independent clause can stand alone as a sentence. By itself, an independent clause is also known as a main clause, or it might be considered a simple sentence. Let's take a look at some of the examples of a sentence with independent and independent clauses. The first example reads, when I get older, I will be able to drive. If you notice, the comma is after the word older. So the first group of words we have when I get older. That is considered a dependent clause. And the words that's after the comma, I will be able to drive, is independent, because that's an actual sentence. It can stand alone. So when we look at it, it's considered dependent and independent. Let's look at another example. Here is my truck, an old Ford. So the first group, here is my truck, is an actual sentence. The comma is behind the word truck, and old Ford is a dependent clause. It's not a sentence. So here we have an independent and a dependent clause. And our final example, if you are good, comma, I will buy you a toy. So the first group of words, if you are good, is a dependent clause because it cannot stand alone. And behind the comma is the actual sentence. I will buy you a toy. So that is considered independent. So we have dependent and independent. And as you notice, the comma is in between each one of the clauses. Another rule to look at is the fourth rule, when we use a comma to separate a quotation from the rest of the sentence. This is something that you see quite often as well. Also, when you're reading books, it's separating what someone says. The example that we have here, it is what a person has said. So understanding where the comma goes is very important to differentiate what a person says. So we have the quotations. We need to buy more sugar, she said, before it runs out. So what the person said is actually in the quotations. But we need to make sure that we understand where the commas go in the sentence. So as we look here at the example, you will note that the comma is right after what the person says. We need to buy more sugar, comma, she said. Then there's another comma there because the sentence continues on before it runs out. And then you put the exclamation mark after the word out and you close the quotation. You have to make sure that your punctuation goes inside the quotation when you are concluding the actual sentence. Another rule we're going to consider is the fifth rule for using a comma, and it is for separating any words or phrases from the rest of the sentence that is not essential to the sentence's meaning. So what I mean by that is sometimes you'll say a phrase and it provides extra information about the subject. The subject is who or what the actual sentence is about. So let's look at a few examples of sentences with words that are not essential to the sentence's meaning. My brother, a 26-year-old male, is watching TV. So the information that's not so important is a 26-year-old male. So if I'm telling you something and I say my brother is watching TV, I do not have to tell you that he's a 26-year-old male. So that's the part that you consider to not be so important. And you're going to put a comma in between my brother and a 26-year-old male. And there's another comma there as well. Another example would be Amy Rivers, my best friend, comma, is going to the mall today. So if you pay attention to how you read it, you'll also notice that you're pausing in between those those words. And so essentially that means that that's where you're going to place the comma. In our final example, it says, tonight, however, will be very exciting. So, however is not something that's important, but as you note, the commas are there. Our final rule we're going to look at is the use of a comma to separate an introductory element from the rest of a sentence. This will be our final rule. It's the sixth one. And I wanted to demonstrate this one because we often, with writing memos, you often have an introductory element within the sentences. So let's look at a sentence as an example. Hi, how are you? Hi, comma, how are you? If you write the sentence originally the way the first example was, it's totally incorrect. You have to put the comma after the introductory element, which is the word hi. And another example would be, yes, I would like more water, please. The introductory element is the word yes. So the comma will actually go after the word yes. And that would conclude how you would write that particular sentence with the comma. The other examples of using commas, there are other rules, but it's pretty much something that you would be familiar with, such as using a comma in a date when you're writing your physical address. So we use commas for quite a few things, but here we're just going over the 6 different rules, and I hope you are more familiar with how to place the comma in your sentences.